My name is Carl. I am a woodworker. I design and make furniture based out of Cornwall in the beautiful southwest of the UK. I'm originally from Sweden, and I think growing up in Sweden you do have a fairly strong connection with wood, seeing as wood in construction is still fairly common in houses and so forth. But I think that connection, for me at least, was lost when I embarked on a 20-odd year career in technology, online technology, which took me to London, where I spent 15 years, and Tokyo, a couple of years in Tokyo. And it was when I was in Japan, really, towards the end of those 15 years, that I really appreciated their love of craftsmanship and where craftsmanship sits in society in Japan. And I think it was then I decided to try to have a second career as a furniture maker. I came back to London, I left my job at Apple, and I embarked to train as a cabinet maker, furniture maker. With this Scandinavian background combined with my very traditional English fine furniture maker training, I guess what I'm aiming for is to combine this quality bespoke craftsmanship with maybe a restrained design language in a way. And I don't mean without design, I just want the design to come across as really thought through. I think I had this romantic notion when I started my training that I'd end up in a small workshop in a wooden creaky hut just by the sea, full of sawdust, but I've ended up in pretty much the polar opposite of that. And there are many reasons for that, primarily one being climate control, really. Having a wet workshop in a windy part of the world is not ideal. You're trying to create these very precise pieces, and wood is an organic material. It takes on moisture, it releases moisture, so if you have very shifting climate inside a workshop, it's very, very hard to do precise work. Funnily enough, because I'm not the most organized person, I've also ended up with a very organized workshop. I think that is a lot of spending your time looking for tools throughout the day. Gets to you after a while and you automatically start getting a bit more organized, and as a result I now have a workshop that looks crazy organized, but it's actually saving me time. In the 3 or so years since I started the company, I've been lucky, I've been busy, having had a fair few clients in the hospitality industry. Of course, last year, 2020, with the pandemic, that hit that industry quite hard, and understandably a lot of that work kind of dried up overnight. But that's the benefit of being a small company and a small maker, is that you're nimble, you can pivot quite easily, and it's been a great opportunity for me to kind of rethink who I am as a maker, where I want to go, and I'm working on some quite exciting projects now as a result of that. One interesting trend for furniture in general is that I think we're starting to see people moving away a little bit from the kind of throwaway mass market culture that's dominated for quite a while, and starting to value longevity or genuinely well-made products that will last longer. As much as possible, I like to work with locally sourced timber. Cornish oak, for instance, is a great example. Due to the fairly wild climate around here, it's got a lot of character. If you have a commission that allows for it and you can kind of put that grain in display, it's really, really quite exciting. So if you add this traditional furniture maker training I've had to my technology background, I think that juxtaposition is something that comes across in quite a lot of my work. Whether that being using modern technology to enhance the process of making, or when I design pieces that sometimes might harmonize or incorporate technology in a certain way. A good example of this kind of crossroads, if you will, between technology and tradition is a recent project I had, which was some wall-mounted nightstands, bedside tables, for a client who absolutely hates cables, yet wants to be able to charge a lot of devices at night. And he ended up with me incorporating wireless charging in quite intricate ways into a piece of bespoke furniture, and it was fun. My process for designing and making furniture is really in 3 rough stages. It's the design phase, there's a prototype phase, and there's a making phase. The making phase is often often the quickest, because by the time you really start cutting into all that beautiful, expensive wood, you really need to know exactly what you're going to do. The design phase for me often starts with pen and paper, really. You can't beat the freedom of that, but fairly quickly nowadays I start moving into CAD. CAD informs a lot of the prototyping, and then of course the prototyping then feeds back into design, so that's a circular process for quite a while before you get to the stage where you feel confident that it's time to go into production. CAD for me traditionally was my least favorite part of making furniture. I was trained on a traditional CAD package, and it was complex. I think a lot of the traditional CAD packages they cater to so many different users, and they have so much baggage in them that the complexity is just kind of overwhelming. And for me, being able to do changes to a fairly evolved design was never an enjoyable thing to do in those old packages. On the other hand, changing CAD's package overnight is not something that you do lightly. It takes quite a lot of work to go from one to the other. And I remember looking at Shapr3D, and I really liked what it promised. But I remember looking at it for quite a while before I actually committed to moving over and introducing it into my production. The first project I really used Shapr3D in production was a TV or media bench that I was doing. One of the requirements for it was the ability to have a sound bar sitting inside of the furniture, hidden inside the furniture. And in order for that air movement, to allow for that air movement, I needed to have some kind of a speaker grill front to the piece. And I remember being struck that how Shapr3D really kind of enabled me creatively to go down a path I probably wouldn't have gone down to if it wasn't for using that software. The result of that first project means that Shapr3D has really established itself in my workflow now. And one really interesting thing is I noticed that I'll go to CAD much quicker than I used to do in the design process. One of the first things that really delighted me with Shapr3D was just because of the tactile nature of using a pencil, it just kind of invites you to create in it. And that's very different than the traditional CAD software I'd used. And secondly, I think most importantly, it is really quite easy to go in and tweak already existing designs in it. It doesn't feel as scary as it used to do. And that's a really big deal when you have a process where a prototype informs back to the design and you go back and forth between those two. If that's a fluid process, it's a very, very good thing. The direct modeling capabilities of Shapr3D means that I can do the tweaks necessary to a design much faster and get back into the workflow. Somehow I feel like the models now live and evolve together with me throughout the whole project. So really, while CAD used to be a necessary evil, it's now working for me and actually elevating my process. And after all, that's what all tools in my workshop should do. I now found that my iPad almost lives on my bench because it is such an integral part of the entire process for me now. I go back and reference things, or even in the making phase. I think there's something with a kind of instant on nature of the iPad that just invites it to be a very, very useful tool that doesn't stop your creative flow in a way, whether you're working on designing, prototyping, or making. So really, it's the immediacy of an iPad combined with the intuitive way that Shapr3D is made that really feels fantastic for me and the way that I work. One of the really big benefits for me is that we're starting to see things like handheld CNC routers coming to the market, which is incredibly beneficial for a smaller workshop like mine. The first thing I think that struck me with Shapr3D is just how uncluttered it is, the interface, and I think that's a really good thing. It's incredibly powerful, don't be fooled by the light interface. It can still do pretty much everything I needed to do, but it's not overwhelming in that sense. Another thing you definitely notice is how hard they work on developing this software, and the updates are coming hard and fast, and the improvements are incredible just in the year or two that I've been using it, and yet they haven't lost the soul of the experience.